Hi, I'm Rashonda Cade. This is Reading with Rashonda. All right, 19th century lit fans, we are reading The House Behind the Cedars by Charles Chesnutt. We are on chapter 9. It's titled Doubts and Fears. I don't think we're going to make it through the whole thing. It's possible, though. So let's go ahead and read. Chapter 9, Doubts and Fears. Rena's heart was too heavy with these misgivings for her to keep them to herself. On the morning after the conversation with Tryon, in which she had promised him an answer within a week, she went into her brother's study where he usually spent an hour after breakfast before going to his office. He looked up amiably from the book before him and read trouble in her face. Well, Rena, dear, he asked with a smile, what's the matter? Is there anything you want, money, or what? I should like to have Aladdin's lamp, though I'd hardly need it, that you might not have no wish unsatisfied. Whew! That you might have no wish unsatisfied. I got caught up in the double negatives there. He had found her very backward in asking for things that she needed. Generous with his means, he thought nothing too good for her. Her success had gratified his pride and justified his course in taking her under his protection. Thank you, John. You give me already more than I need. It is something else, John. George wants me to say when I will marry him. I am afraid to marry him without telling him. If he should find out afterwards, he might cast me off or cease to love me. If he did not know it, I should be forever thinking of what he would do if he should find it out, or if I should die without his having learned it. I should not rest easy in my grave for thinking of what he would have done if he had found it out. Warwick's smile gave place to a grave expression at this somewhat comprehensive statement. He rose and closed the door carefully, lest some one of the servants might overhear the conversation. More liberally endowed with Rena than Rena with imagination, and not without a vein of sentiment, he had nevertheless a practical side that outweighed them both. With him, the problem that oppressed his sister had been in the main a matter of argument of self-conviction. Once persuaded that he had certain rights or ought to have them by virtue of the laws of nature in defiance of the customs of mankind, he had promptly sought to enjoy them. Okay, so John is saying, I have the right to these things, so I'm going to enjoy them and I'm not going to think about any consequences. But Rena didn't have the same thing on her mind. This he had been able to do by simply concealing his antecedents and making the most of his opportunities, with no troublesome qualms of conscience whatever. But he had already perceived in their brief intercourse that Rena's emotions, while less easily stirred, touched a deeper note than his, and dwelt upon it with greater intensity than if they had been spread over the larger field to which a more ready sympathy would have supplied so many points of access. Hers was a deep and silent current flowing between the narrow walls of a self-contained life. That's really interesting. So her sympathies were a deep and silent current flowing between the narrow walls of a self-contained life. I don't have anything in particular to make of that, but it's really interesting to me. Warwick's imagination, however, enabled him to put himself in touch with her mood and recognize its bearings upon her conduct. Oh, okay, I skipped something. Oh, I just skipped the last part of that sentence. Okay, sorry. Let me just start this sentence over again. Where does the sentence even start? Oh my gosh. Like literally, wow, this sentence is long. Okay, this is one sentence. I'm going back to the beginning of this sentence and I'm going to read the whole thing. All right. But he had already perceived in their brief intercourse that Rena's emotions, while less easily stirred, touched a deeper note than his, and dwelt upon it with greater intensity than if they had been spread over the larger field to which a more ready sympathy would have supplied so many points of access. Hers was a deep and silent current flowing between the narrow walls of a self-contained life, his the spreading river that ran through a pleasant landscape. That was one sentence. Warwick's imagination, however, enabled him to put himself in touch with her mood and recognize its bearings upon her conduct. He would have preferred her taking the practical point of view to bring her round to which he perceived would be a matter of diplomacy. How long have these weighty thoughts been troubling your small head? He asked with assumed lightness. Grr! How long have these weighty thoughts been troubling your small head? Like women can't have weighty thoughts and like our heads are small. Seriously, John, you're getting on my nerves. Since he asked me last night to name our wedding day. My dear child, continued Warwick, you take too tragic a view of life. Marriage is a reciprocal arrangement by which the contracting parties give love for love, care for keeping, faith for faith. It is a matter of future, not of the past. What a poor soul it is that has not some secret chamber sacred to itself, where one can file away the things others have no right to know, as well as things that one himself would fain forget. We are under no moral obligation to inflict upon others the history of our past mistakes, our wayward thoughts, our secret sins, our desperate hopes, or our heartbreaking disappointments. Still less are we bound to bring them out from this secret chamber, the dusty record of our ancestry. I mean, I get what he's saying, but I don't agree. Let the dead past bury its dead. George Tryon loves you for yourself alone. It is not your ancestors that he seeks to marry. But would he marry me if he knew? She persisted. Warwick paused for reflection. He would have preferred to argue the question in a general way, but felt the necessity. Oh, he is a lawyer, and I'm not saying anything bad about lawyers, but like they argue questions often based on their theoretical merits. And those theoretical merits certainly have practical applications, but I don't think he's made that move to practical application yet. Oh, okay. That's interesting. All right. He would have preferred to argue the question in a general way, but felt the necessity of satisfying her scruples as far as might be. He had liked Tryon from the very beginning of their acquaintance. In all their intercourse, which had been very close for several months, he had been impressed by the young man's sunny temper, his straightforwardness, his intellectual honesty. Tryon's deference to Warwick as the elder man had very naturally proved an attraction. Whether this friendship would have stood the test of utter frankness about his own past was a merely academic speculation with which Warwick did not trouble himself. With his sister, the question had evidently become a matter of conscience, a difficult subject with which to deal in a person of Rena's temperament. My dear sister, he replied, why should he know? He haven't we haven't asked him for his pedigree. We don't care to know it. If he cares for ours, he should ask for it, and it would then be time enough to raise the question. You love him, I imagine, and wish to make him happy. Okay, I get it. I get it. I get it. And his logic isn't wrong, but it's still not quite all the way there. It is the highest wish of the woman who loves. The enamored man seeks his own happiness. The loving woman finds no sacrifice too great for the loved one. The fiction of chivalry made man serve woman. The fact of human nature makes woman happiest when serving where she loves. I am very happy to serve my husband and my children and my family. I really am. I'm very happy to serve where I love. But some of this stuff John is espousing makes me uncomfortable. It makes me like, did you hear my neck pop? All right. Yes, oh yes, Rena exclaimed with fervor, clasping her hands unconsciously. I'm afraid he'd be unhappy if he knew, and would make me miserable to think him unhappy. Well, then, said Warwick, suppose we should tell him our secret and put ourselves in his power, and that he should then conclude that he couldn't marry you. Do you imagine he would be any happier than he is now, or than if he should never know? Ah, no, she could not think so. One could not tear love out of one's heart without pain and suffering. There was a knock at the door. Warwick opened it to the nurse, who stood with little Albert in her arms. Please, sir, said the girl with a curtsy. The baby's being crying and fretting for Miss Rena, and I allowed she might want me to fetch him if it wouldn't disturb her. Give me the darling, exclaimed Rena, coming forward and taking the child from the nurse. It wants its auntie. Come to its auntie. Bless its little heart. Okay, so a few questions. Yes, she goes by Rena. Her name is Rowena, though. What does Tryon call her Rena? I think he might have. But like it's interesting to me that the servants are calling her Rena. I mean, it's Miss Rena. Okay, so I'm back a few pages later where the page where Warwick declared his love, and he said Miss Warwick, Rowena, so he used her whole name. Names are important. I got not a lot to say about this, but it's percolating. So let's think about that. And then also something interesting. Why is Rena referring to her nephew as it? The nephew is Warwick's son. Why not say he wants his auntie? Come to his auntie. Bless his little heart. Why it? That's weird to me. All right. Little Albert crowed with pleasure and put up his pretty mouth for a kiss. Warwick found the sight a pleasant one. If he could but quiet his sister's troublesome scruples, he might ere long see her fondling beautiful children of her own. Even if Rena were willing to risk her happiness, and he to endanger his position by a quixotic frankness, the future of his child must not be compromised. And this is where the rubber meets the road. So he's got all of these philosophical things about why it's right or not. But what it comes down to is John Warwick doesn't want to lose his place in society, nor the place that he has carved out for his family. And I don't blame him. I'm not faulting him for that. But he's acting like, oh, this is this big theoretical thing that you don't even have to bother with. But when it really comes down to it, he doesn't want to be disturbed. Disturbia. Okay, sorry, that was in my head. You wouldn't want to make George unhappy, Warwick resumed when the nurse retired. Very well. Would you not be willing for his sake to keep a secret? Your secret and mine, and that of the innocent child in your arms? Would you involve all of us in difficulties merely to secure your own peace of mind? Dang! Your peace of mind is meaningless to my personal security. Uh, uh. Doesn't such a course seem just the least bit selfish? He is totally gaslighting her here. Think the matter over from that point of view, and we'll speak of it later in the day. I shall be with George all the morning, and I may be able, by a little management, to find out what his views on the subject of birth and family and all that. Some men are very liberal, and love is a great leveler. I'll sound him at any rate. He kissed the baby and left Rena to her own reflections. How long is this kid going to be a baby? Like, is this really still a baby? He had that, like, I don't know how old the kid was when Rena came to live with him, but like the kid was alive. And Rena went away to school for a whole year. And then she came back and she was the queen of love and beauty. But it's been like some months. So let's say Rena's been there for at least 15 months, right? And let's say the kid was, what, 6 months old when Rena came? So this kid is two. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, he's a baby, but is he toddling around? Like, and he's not saying anything? Have you ever met a 2-year-old who's not always talking? 2-year-olds have the most to say. They've got a lot, and you don't always understand what they're talking about, but they're saying all the things. All right. Okay, he's going to sound out George. He kissed the baby and left Rena to her own reflections, to which his presentation of the case had given a new turn. It had never before occurred to her to regard silence in the light of self-sacrifice. Because, yes, she's totally willing to self-sacrifice. We've got a lot of unhealthy things happening here. It had seemed a sort of sin. Her brother's argument made it a virtue. It was not the first time nor the last that right and wrong had been a matter of viewpoint. Now, that's the truth. Right and wrong is often a matter of viewpoint, but it's not always a matter of viewpoint. I feel like I've been rambling on for a long time, so I'm gonna stop. I don't know what might come up in the next like 2 pages, and it might take me a million years to get through it. So we're gonna stop here. We'll come back next time. I'm Rashonda Cade. This is Reading with Rashonda.